So, Casey, it's a real joy to be having this conversation with you. I already feel the tingling aliveness of the possibility of what can happen when we are connected with nature as a true part of it. I'm curious to see where this conversation goes.
Yes, me too.
So to start, you call yourself a healthy sensuality coach, and I'd love to hear more about what that means to you, both what sensuality is to you and the healthy part. What does it mean to you when you say healthy?
Yeah. So I define sensuality as your ability to to infuse joy, presence into your daily life. Excuse me, joy, presence, and pleasure into your
Mm.
daily life,
Mm.
which is a little bit different than I think what comes to mind when some people hear sensuality.
Yeah.
Um, and the healthy part, for a while, I was calling myself a sensuality coach. And then it started to feel more aligned to say a healthy sensuality coach. Number one, because there are so many preconceived notions that we have when we hear the word sensuality, but also because when you put the word healthy in front of something, it's almost like saying you're wanting to better your relationship with it. So if
Mm.
I'm wanting to focus on healthy eating, I'm wanting to better my relationship with food.
Mm.
And when you think about healthy sensuality, that's really what it's about. It's bettering your relationship with your body, with
Mm.
your sexuality, with your
Mhm.
ability to experience pleasure and
Mhm.
joy.
Mhm.
So I really like healthy sensuality coach.
Yeah. I love that focus on relationship. Relationship is one of the things that I focus on a lot too, like relationship with my body, relationship with other people in my life, relationship with the plants in my garden and the bees and all of the different elements, even relationship with all the different parts of myself.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and it's beautiful. And when you put it through the lens of relationship, it's kind of like, oh, well, just like any relationship, there's ways to improve it, and it's always changing, and
Mm,
it's not um, it's not stiff, it's not rigid, it's
mm,
very very malleable. And so
mhm.
that word relationship kind of opens up that ability to really mold it into what you want it to be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know of many relationships that are static and firm that way, or at least that operate well when static and fixed that way. It does feel, I'm noticing, I think when I think of relationship, one of the things I think of is my relationship with my partner. And it is constantly evolving. We're constantly renegotiating, not in a legal sense, but in as we continue to grow as individuals, as we continue to pursue our desires in life. It's like, okay, who are we now? How do we relate to each other now?
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. And that's beautiful. I love that you have those check-ins too, because I feel like when it's been my experience, when that's not there, that is when it feels like stuck and hard.
Mm.
And yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and kind of bringing that's a very natural quality, isn't it? That kind of things being ever changing. Like I'm looking out the window and there's been rain for a couple of weeks, and just looking out at this same landscape every day shows me how things are always kind of moving through their cycles and seasons, and that it's not the nature of nature to be fixed and static.
Yep. I learned that during the 30-day challenge that I just did, where I was
Yeah,
meditating with a tree for 30 days for 10 minutes.
tell us more
Um,
about that.
so I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we have all four seasons. And it was freakishly cold this year. And it was like, especially right when I started the challenge. So I was kind of giggling because I'm having to like bundle up and like go outside and sit outside next to a tree during some of the coldest parts. But you get the lowest, it was like 16 degrees. And then it was,
Fahrenheit, right? So that's below
mm,
0 Celsius.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you for that.
Very
Yeah,
cold, below
very
freezing.
good. Very good. And I was just like, "Whew, this is kind of interesting." But throughout the course of the uh, 30 days, it was like, frigid and icy, where I was literally like having to chip through just to get to the root to sit by the base of the tree. Um, and then the following week, it got a little bit warmer, and then the snow started to melt, and then it was just kind of like a little slushy, and then it kept transitioning. It got a little warmer, and then by the last day, it was 70 degrees.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just like total.
In 2 weeks, below
Yeah,
freezing to
it,
70s, like 20
yeah,
Celsius, roughly.
yeah, yeah. In
Mm.
like in that 30 days, and I was just like, wow. And I was in a t-shirt and long pants and tennis shoes, and that's just the lessons of nature
Yeah.
and the different challenges and beauties that kind of came with like in that span of time.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I definitely don't mean to imply that I find it easy that everything is always changing. Just that that's more the nature of things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and there's almost like I find there's almost like a comfort in it in a way, because it's like
Mm.
it is the only constant that
Mm.
things are always changing.
Mm.
You're like,
Mm.
well, okay. So when it's good, that's great. It's always changing, and when it's bad, okay, this too shall pass. So
Mm. Mm. I want to come back to that and to your relationship with trees. But first, I'm curious about, I think you mentioned sensuality as being joy, pleasure, and something else in purpose, maybe
presence.
presence in your
Hmm.
daily life. What are some of your favorite ways right now, subject to change, of finding that in your daily life?
It's really the little things,
Mm.
like when I wake up in the morning, I lie there and I'm just like, ooh, I'm so warm. And I feel, I have this super soft blanket, this
Mm-hmm.
fleece blanket, and I just feel myself wrapped in it. And I'm like,
Mm.
I am so cozy. I feel so calm. There's nothing for me to do, in this very moment other than just be here.
Mm.
And just like, even if it's just a couple minutes, that to me feels like so pleasurable. Um, and then I normally get up and I will go to the mirror, and I just find something that I like about myself. I'll normally say some type of like, I really like your eyes, because as we're so conditioned to find what's wrong.
Yeah.
And then I normally just like stretch and I move and I check in, with my body, and I find the simple pleasure in just like, okay, yeah, that spot's a little tight, or like, oh, it feels really nice to stretch, and just like that, like honoring of the initial check-in with myself.
Mm.
Just
Mm.
kind of try to start my day off that way, so that it keeps
Yeah.
being able to weave in.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how accessible that is too. Like, it's not even like you necessarily have to do lots of different things or add things to your routine. It's more about the way that you move throughout your day and the way that you take in the pleasure that is available there in each moment.
Yeah.
Or even if it is an effort, it's a small effort. It can be making a cup of tea or lighting something, a candle that you like, or just um, things that are really at your fingertips.
Yeah. Yeah. And that really, I think one of my favorite parts of that between the joy, presence, and pleasure um, is the presence part. It's like you can
Mm.
always use that as a tool to bring you like right
Yes.
back here.
Yes.
And it's so gentle, it's so gentle and it's just so, oh yeah, right. And I'm right back here. And there goes the mind, and I'm right back here.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not hard. It's just like, okay, and we're returning.
Yeah.
Or it's I should say it's not hard in the sense where it's not like a big forced act. Like you said, it's just kind of like, okay,
Mhm.
little things.
Mhm. Sometimes it can, like, focusing my awareness can feel a bit like herding cats, but other times it's easier.
With laser pointers.
Let's just pause for a moment and just envision a cat playing with a laser pointer, because cats bring me a lot of joy.
Uh-huh.
I
Yep.
definitely have been making a conscious effort to bring more cat videos into my social media feeds just because it brings me joy.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
And now I thought about cats and I forgot the question that I wanted to ask next. Oh, I was going to say that the way that I like to think of sensuality too is our relationship with our senses, is the senses being our gateway into the present moment, which is like what you were saying. It's like if I feel that my mind is somewhere else, or I'm not present, one of the kind of most at my fingertips straightforward ways to become present is, oh, okay, what can I see here and enjoy looking at? What can I smell? What can I feel in my body? And that kind
Mm-hmm.
of gently draws my attention into presence rather than having to force it so hard.
I really like that, and I like that you're finding presence using what's already there, like using
Mm.
the body. So,
Mm.
oh, what am I smelling? Oh, what am I feeling? Rather than something like external, and
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah. 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 So I'd love to come back to your relationship with trees. You mentioned meditating with trees. And in the spirit of talking about relationships, um, I'd love to. I'm lately getting a lot of these kind of metaphors popping into my head. I've been knitting a lot,
Oh,
but
cool.
of like knitting and weaving and kind of knitting myself back into community with all of life, all of the ecosystem around me, including what we would think of as like nature, like the bush outside with the plants and the sky and all that sort of thing, but also in community with other humans and in relationship with whatever benevolent energy wants to be with me and move through me.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a bit of what your experience is of that.
Mm. As I was listening to you talk, I almost just had this like, 'cause you're talking about weaving, this just like feeling of like with spring coming and things opening up and like people being able to reconnect, this just like
Mm.
interweaving of all of those things, and just feels really hopeful because I'm like,
Mm.
oh, like I'm longing for that, so I appreciated that
Mm.
description.
I'm really
um
longing for that sense of like community in person myself at the moment. I've got a couple of really good friends where I live, but it doesn't feel like there's a big strong community here. And my partner and I are about to move, and that's one of the things that we're craving, is to really find in-person community, like show up at your house for a cup of tea after a quick phone call kind of community.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've got really beautiful relationships online, and some of my closest friends I know are online, but there is still that desire to be in person with people. And I
Mm-hmm.
know here in Australia, our experience of COVID has been different from yours, but I imagine for different reasons, you may have that desire to be coming back into connection with people too.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. It's very much so people are like, can we be around each other now, please?
Mm.
Safely, but just miss you.
Yeah.
Um, and and yeah, and to answer your question too, with the weaving and that experience with trees, it was wild because that whole thing was sparked by a an assignment from our wonderful trauma awareness goddess Shelby, who I know is
Mhm.
on.
She was the
uh,
previous episode before this
yeah.
one, if you want to listen to that magic.
It's and this beautiful assignment of like, hey, if you could do marketing in a way that just like felt like easy and exciting and something that you want to do, like what would it be? And I just closed my eyes and immediately it was like meditate with a tree for 30 days. I was like, okay, I'm thinking like, posting or doing, all these known marketing things. And it came through very clear. And
Mm.
the, one of the biggest things that I took away from that was like actually having time each day to step away from the screen,
Mm.
physically walk, get some movement in, and just physically connect to a tree. Like I would just put my back on the tree and just sit down and be with it was amazing. And I at first I was like, okay, I'm gonna like sit down this tree. I'm gonna get so much insights and blah 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 blah. And then as soon as I did that, the only thing that just kept coming through was just like be,
Mm.
connect in. And it was almost like I could feel the back of my heart, like the heart chakra just go against the tree.
Ooh.
And it would just be like, and I'm like, ooh. And then I would just be, and I was just connecting. There's nothing to do. There's no screen in my face. It's just like me and this tree. And so then I would just, sit there and do a little meditation and just that connectedness, um, physically connecting to nature,
Mm.
detached from technology,
Mm.
felt really good.
Mm.
It felt really good, and it felt like I was actually connecting to my roots by
Mm.
connecting to the roots, like the actual literal roots. And I could feel the difference between the different ways of connecting online, which are also beautiful, but
Yeah.
then this very tangible, pure connection.
Yeah. Yeah. I also hear, I think that's often a common way that we start. You go, like it's been the same for me too. I think if I'm going to go meditate in nature or with the ocean or something, I'm going to go and get answers. And there's this kind of initial impulse to like go and see what we can get from it. But I've also heard you talk about just offering love to the trees. And I think there's a beautiful reciprocity that with nature that, and this includes the nature in our bodies, like we are not separate from nature, but this, it kind of, I guess, relates to the way that we approach our bodies too. Are we just trying to get something from our bodies, get
Yeah,
an orgasm, get the energy to do the things
right.
versus the kind of dance back and forth of giving and receiving and working together in collaboration.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for reminding me of the part of the piece about giving love to the trees too, because I did initially went out and I was like, okay, this is an assignment.
Mm.
What can I get from this? Which is part of the human
Yeah.
mind. But it was, that message was so clear, was to give love. The trees,
Yeah.
they needed it. And from meditating with the different trees too, I just kind of started to notice some of the different markings and patterns and that they had, and started to do a little bit of research. And I found that the trees here, because where I live used to be like a big coal city. And so the air was just like really thick with um, all this stuff that was not good for humans or trees. And a lot of the conditions that the trees are in now, a lot of them are falling down or they're older. Some of
Mm.
them have the rot, is actually a result of that.
Mm.
And so when I like leaned back and I was like, oh, this is a really strong desire to give love, that's kind of what it led me to. I'm like, oh, wow, these trees are like, they're doing the best that they can, but they've been here for a really long time and they're still feeling the effects of how things were.
Mm. Our bodies are the same too, aren't they?
Yeah.
Something can have happened many, many years ago, and our bodies are still feeling the impact of it now.
Exact. Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. Kind of hold on, that the body holds on.
Mm. Keeps that record.
Mhm.
Yeah. I also just want to name that, like, obviously, we haven't come up with these ideas ourselves, that this relationship of reciprocity with nature is, I would say that if you go back far enough in any of our lineages, you would reach a time when the people were living more in a um, healthy reciprocal relationship with nature. But it is the indigenous traditions that are still alive in our world now are really re-showing us the way back to that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's nothing new, and I'm happy that we're being led back to that. I'm seeing more people outside than ever before,
Mm.
which is good.
Mm.
That was, one of the silver lining pieces of COVID was, we weren't allowed to go out for so long, and one of the only
Mm.
places that were open were parks.
Mm-hmm.
And woods, and so it got a lot more people out in nature.
Mm-hmm. So what did it feel like to be sitting with the trees when you were just offering them love?
Hmm. Oh, let me feel into that one for a sec. It's wild. Like when I feel into it, I actually notice myself lean back and kind of that back
Mm.
connection, whoosh, like I
Mm.
talked about. It almost felt like plugging in and just almost like help, like you a healthy plug in and a feeling of helping a friend or
Mm.
someone that you really loved that was in need of some care,
Mm-hmm.
and not from ob- like a obligatory sense, from like a purely just like I got you,
Mm-hmm.
like a very mutual,
Mm.
very mutual sense.
Mm.
And I felt like I already knew how to do it.
Yeah.
Like I just innately, I've never studied or read a book on how to connect with trees, but I
Yeah.
just innately just like whoosh, I knew.
I think that's also indicative of how we did evolve in relationship with all of life, and especially those of us in with European backgrounds. Our ancestors really lost that connection and then took it away from other cultures. But our bodies still hold the memory of how to do that. And I feel there was when you and I were talking earlier, the word devotion really comes to me, that there's this sense of devotion to the trees, devotion to the earth, devotion to our bodies. And what is your relationship with something when you're devoted to it?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I love that word. Yeah, I love the devotion word. And I mean, for me, in the work that I do, it's a lot about being devoted to your body and showing up for your body, um, in a way that it's just like your body knows, and because you've built a relationship, a healthy relationship with it, that your body knows, that you have its back,
Mm.
you know, and it's that. And it takes a long time to get there. It took me
Mm-hmm.
and I'm still on that journey, but like, devotion for me is like when you get to that point where, meeting your body's needs and taking care of yourself is so um is so aligned, and it almost becomes second nature, that not doing it feels like a disservice. It feels like you're
Mm-hmm.
dishonoring your body.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. When you talk about meeting your body's needs, do you have some examples of different ways that can look?
Yeah. So, if anybody ever coaches with me, they will know this, because I feel like I sound like a broken record. But the first thing that I do when I get on a call with a client is breathe, because a lot of us forget to do that, including myself. And then I ask them, "Are your biological needs met? Are you fed? Are you hydrated?
Mhm.
Are you rested?
Mhm.
Have you moved? Like, have you moved today?"
Mhm.
Um, and that seems very like, well, duh, like very base level. But I coached in as a health and wellness educator for 8 years, and I learned that if those basic needs aren't met,
Mhm.
if those foundational needs aren't met, it's really, really hard to work on anything on top of that. And so
Mhm.
if your body's hungry or super dehydrated, it's going to be in a stress response and in survival mode. And when it's in that space, that's its main focus, that's its main
Mhm.
priority. And when you try to push, higher level concepts or even thoughts on top of that, the body's just like, oh, it's kind of in the stress state. And so just meeting that, like just meeting that those basic needs isn't easy by any means. Because
Yeah.
we've been, that's a whole nother thing. But when it's consistent, and I've seen, like, even working with my clients, when that's consistent, when that becomes consistent, whatever we're focusing on starts to really get better and better and better,
Yeah.
because the body now feels safe. It's like,
Yeah.
I care enough about you to meet your basic needs so that we can go throughout the day and handle whatever life throws at us today.
Mm. Mm. There's a real sweetness to that. Like I hear you describe it, it reminds me of like a parent or a caregiver taking care of a young child that can't yet feed itself, or, you know, that really needs an adult to meet those needs. And that there's a real sweetness to having that same orientation of care for yourself and your own body.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that comparison, because that's kind of what it feels like. You're just like, you're the adult and you're the kid, and you're like, did you eat? are you staying up and watching Netflix, or did you sleep last night? Like, what are you doing? In a very loving way. But yeah, but that, and then, with the devotion, I feel like, for me, that was that first layer I got to when I was consistently doing that, not perfectly, no one's perfect,
Mm.
but when I was consistently doing it, that's really when that first level of like, my body was like, oh, I think it could feel the devotion. Because I was like, I'm going to take care of you.
Yeah. Yeah. I just had this image of like a flowering plant that needs the right amount of sun, the right amount of water, enough nutrients, space.
Yeah.
Well, the kind of tending that a plant might need to get the flowers to come through.
Right. Yeah. We don't just look at a plant and go, bloom. Like, I need some other stuff first. Unless you're magical. Maybe you can do it, because I mean, you're pretty magical.
I think I'm probably a little bit better at taking care of my own body than my plants, to be honest. With my plants, it seems quite hit or miss what happens to them. I don't know how to speak their language just as well yet. Yeah. So when you do work with your clients, you start with that kind of foundational level of having your basic needs met. What other kinds of things do you love working with people around?
I love when people start to be able to tap into their body and get their own responses to questions.
Yes.
So like, there's the foundation setting, right? That's step one. There's developing safety, finding safety in the body. That's step two. And then it's like, once the body base levels are met, foundations met, space safety's there, then it's like, then the body starts talking. At the first couple times that happens, they're like, whoa, what was that? Like, I just got a message, or I just got this. I'm like, yeah, your body is just like there. And when it feels safe, it like wants to take the mic and be like, okay, we got like thousands of messages here. We've been holding on to stuff for a while. Here you go. And so I really
I've been hoping you would ask.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Like, oh, I thought you'd never ask.
Yes.
Remember that one time?
That's it.
And I really truly enjoy that, because it's like, number one, you realize you have this support that's there all the time, and it's like right under the surface, but it's always got your back. And so I really enjoy, when people start to feel safe enough to get to that point, and then seeing the empowerment that comes with like little things, like, yeah, like I was at the restaurant the other day and they gave me the menu, and I looked at it, and normally I would just like, analyze, I want this, I want that, I want this. And they were like, oh, my body wants fish. And it's just, they're like, it just made it so much easier, because they knew. And so that's the thing that kind of lights me up, because it's like you're forming this new relationship with somebody who already knows so much about you and just wants to help.
I love that. I find too, sometimes it can be hard to see how, when your body is giving you signals that are painful or not in, they feel like they're not in alignment with what you want. This is kind of what I was talking to Shelby about in the last episode. It can be hard to see how the body really does have your best interest at heart. But even if the body's messages, or the body's, whatever is happening in your body, even if that doesn't always feel good, or it might not be supportive anymore, but
Yeah.
there is an intelligence behind it, underneath it, that's doing the best it can based on the experiences it's had to keep you alive and keep you safe. And it
Yeah.
can take some decoding and some space and compassion, but that impulse for life at the heart of all of it is really one of the most beautiful and sacred things to me.
Mm, beautifully said.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you for presencing that, it's not always like, "Yay!" There's definitely those layers there, and they take time. They require
Mm-hmm.
lots of slowness.
Mm-hmm.
But at the heart of it is, it's that desire for life.
Yeah, I saw what you just did with your
Yeah.
hand. It made me think of a beating heart.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I oh, I shared in our call earlier, but I had on St. Patrick's Day, I had a really scary experience with my body. Just woke up, tight shoulders, and then sat up. I felt like I was going to pass out, and I ran to the bathroom. And then I had, um, that I had cold sweats, and I was just sitting there the whole time. And like, those are all really scary feelings. Like for me, losing
Mm-hmm.
consciousness is, my body was giving me all of these signs that were just like, something's wrong, something's wrong. And they didn't feel pleasant at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were scary. But they were pointing me to something. Like they were there for a reason. And just having the awareness that I have that the body is always speaking. I'm like, okay, I know that you're trying to tell me. I don't know you know, what it is, but I'm constantly checking in and what are you needing? What are you needing? And
Mm-hmm.
so, and eventually it, told me what I needed to get to like a stable place so that I could do something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing how much the body just like is always is just always talking and
Yeah.
giving you messages.
Yeah. 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 That's I approach it probably in a slightly different way to you, but that learning to speak your body's language and let your body's impulses lead
Mm.
and kind of roll with what your body is offering up to you rather than resisting it. That's a very important part of the way that I work too. And it is I I feel like there's so much power that comes from learning how to consult inside yourself, consult your body, consult your own inner wisdom, and move from that place rather than what the outside world is telling you.
Yeah.
Like you were saying with the impulse to meditate for 30 days with a tree for your marketing. Like
Yeah.
there, because our bodies are our beings and our bodies are so unique, the right thing for us, the best wisdom for what's right for us will come from inside us, of course, with influences from other people, and we can learn from each other and be inspired by each other. But I see my role as really guiding people to get in touch with that inner wisdom and inner voice themselves, and to really come back to pleasure and goodness in the body in those accessible everyday ways that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the way that I work. But the kind of two main things that I focus on with people at this stage is either people feeling, mostly women, people or women who feel like disconnected or shut down around their sexuality, or like it's awkward or icky, or like, oh, something just, ugh, that kind of thing. But there
Yeah.
is a part of them that really wants to enjoy it and feel good in it. And have their sexuality feel like a natural part of them.
Yeah.
And so that's one of those cases where the signal the body is giving you might be ick or disgust or like shame.
Yeah.
And when you learn to say yes to that and work with that, I'm like, yeah, say yes to shame. Woohoo, shame.
Right. Yeah.
Well, it's more like just you're not making your body or your experience wrong about what's happening.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, and it's funny how we resist those things because we think shame, awkwardness, disgust, that's not what I want. No. But when you get curious about it, it will show you the way to worthiness, to pleasure, to your own natural wildness, in a way that is, I guess, and like you said, it can be slow, but it kind of flows
Mm-hmm.
rather than needing to be forced.
Yeah.
And the other main thing that I work with my clients on is where they're finding patterns repeating in their relationships and they
Mm-hmm.
want to shift that pattern. And that's another area where your body is really going to, it speaks to you about why that's happening, what's really going on, what it needs.
Yeah.
And your body is really the gateway because it's one of those things, right, where if I've had a pattern of people pleasing in my life. People who know me
Guilty.
might, yeah. People who know me will be shocked to hear this. But it's like I can go, okay, I can see that I'm people pleasing and I need to stop people pleasing. So don't do that anymore. Yeah, cool. That does not stop it from happening.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But if I notice in the moment that I'm saying something that I don't actually feel, it feels like, ooh, I can feel that I'm saying this because I want to keep the other person happy, even though there's some discordance, like it doesn't feel right to me. But
Mm-hmm.
I can start to tune into my body and feel like, ooh, there's fear here of what might happen if they were upset with me. Or
Yeah.
there's shame that I might want the wrong thing. Or, like that's experience of what my body is having in the moment or around that issue is giving me so much good information. And that's really the layer that layer is the gateway.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And I love that you help people with those recurring patterns because
Mm.
it's like, and even in the people pleasing,
Mm.
you can acknowledge it and say something like, oh, I want this to be different, but then it's like still there and you're, why is this still happening? Why is this still
Yeah.
coming up?
Yeah.
And then, we're the gift that you're giving there is really helping people get into the body piece of it too, and
Mm-hmm.
being like,
Mm-hmm.
see what's going on under the surface so that these two can like work together and really figure out what that pattern is and how to change it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the awareness is an important step.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that it's not always the whole process on its own.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, there's like, as we've been discussing, like this kind of relationship of devotion to the body and honoring what it tells us and honoring what it needs and the wisdom within it, and even the savory, and bringing in more pleasure, like it's bringing in more pleasure and honoring the things that are less savory. That sense of devotion is really just like warming my heart, like I have a big smile on my face, and it
Mm.
feels like there's space inside my shoulders and my rib cage.
Yeah. Yeah. it feels like an honoring,
Mhm.
it's an honoring to the body or a recommitment of sorts.
Mhm.
But the word devotion is just really like hits it on the head.
Yeah. Yeah. What is it that hits you on the head with that word devotion?
There's something feeling about the word,
Mhm.
like how I um, experience it. Like commitment feels very head,
Mm.
but like devotion to me, it's like,
Mm.
I associate devotion more with like love. Like
Mhm.
I'm devoted to my body. I'm
Mhm.
loving you. I'm doing this because it's coming from my heart and not from any other place.
Mhm. Mhm. I feel that too. And I think I'm just having a little laugh to myself because both of us calling ourselves some form of sensuality coach, I think that we are like feeling and sensory oriented people in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
Feeling is very much the the plane that I often operate on, which is probably, as I say that, that's probably a big component of what was, when I worked as an engineer, what was feeling out of alignment was that I couldn't, there was no place for that side of me in that role. Really, not in
Mm-hmm.
the way that I could only bring a tiny bit of it. Um,
Yeah.
but as we're speaking about devotion, I also just want to start singing this song. I think it's called Hopelessly Devoted to You. Is it by Olivia Newton-John? Do you know that song?
Yes. But now. Yep. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I haven't thought about that song in a long time.
New morning ritual. I
Mm-hmm.
gaze with myself in the mirror and sing that song.
I immediately shower came to mind because I got this I got this little suction cup with a speaker that I put on my shower now. I
Yes.
hook it up to my phone so I can jam out in the shower.
That sounds like joy, presence, and pleasure to me as well.
Oh yeah.
Shower
Yeah.
speakers.
Well, and I like how you present, in your former job that there wasn't a lot of space for that too. And I think even for the listeners too, if they're like, oh man, like I don't know if acting from a sensory place feels inaccessible or far away.
Mm.
Um, I was very, very much led by I led with my masculine energy predominantly. Masculine meaning structure and doing, and for most of my life. And I was
Mm.
very, very cut off from, or I'd pinched off, I guess, my feminine energy in a lot of ways. And so receiving and
Mm.
being able to really access pleasure and different parts of that were very
Yeah.
inaccessible to me for most of my life.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started to do the sensuality work where it was like, and you can see if you're watching the video, I'm kind of
Yeah.
doing little flowy
Yeah.
movements, but like it's like just a little bit got in, just a
Mm.
little bit of that, like, flow could start to come in. And then after a while, now, like, I'm doing a podcast on sensuality. If you would have told like me 10 years ago that I would be doing that, I probably would have just rolled my eyes and been like, okay, so it's, it really, it's been a slow evolving process
Yeah. Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. For me personally, I don't know that this doesn't necessarily need to be everyone's measure of success, but for me, one of my measures of success is that I feel like the me who I am right now would have triggered the fuck out of the me 10 to 15 years ago.
Yes, exactly. I literally would have eye rolled and be like, oh, this girl. Did you ever just like catch yourself after you just said something? You're like, oh, wow. You just realize, like, yep, I'm there now. I'm that person. I'm that person.
Yes. Yes. I had a lot of judgment. I mean, I'm not perfectly free from judgment, but there definitely would have been a lot of judgment from the me of 10 to 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But as you were describing those two different forms of energy, I think it's beautiful to kind of think about finding the right balance for you. Like the way that sensuality and embodiment looks can look different for every person. Like you can find your own way of it, your own expression of it. And I think, when we talk about, sometimes we talk about masculine and feminine energies, but I think it's not like this is what it means to be a man and this is what it means to be a woman. It's like
Right.
two different flavors of energy that are alive and at play in all of us.
Exactly.
And the flavor of softness and feeling and emotion and energy and creativity, a lot of these other things, um, has not is not as equally respected or celebrated or practiced in a lot of our cultures. So it is a really
Yeah.
beautiful thing for everyone, not just for women, to come back to the balance that feels good to them. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Masculine and feminine energies are just that. There's energy, they're energies. There's no gender attached to them. And I like the freedom to flow. There's just to me, it's just kind of about being aware of how they're dancing inside of you, or
Mm-hmm.
how they're showing up when you do certain things. So if I take a shower in my masculine versus taking a shower with my feminine, like there's no right or wrong, there's no better, but they're going to be two different experiences. And
Mm-hmm.
if I'm with my partner and both of us are kind of leading with a little bit more masculine energy, it's going to be a little bit like, So then one of us will maybe come back and bring out a little more feminine. And then it's just kind of, that polarity increases. And
Yeah.
it really is a dance, but it's
Yeah.
it's just energy,
Mm.
you know?
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. So I think one more thing that I'd love to get your perspective on is how we engage with our intuition. And kind of in the context of this conversation, one of the ways that we could think about intuition, we've been talking about devotion to our bodies, devotion to nature, and that includes the nature of our bodies that have needs and wisdom, devotion to our bodies, devotion to nature. One of the ways that I think of intuition is devotion to that which wishes to move through us. And
Mm,
I don't necessarily think of God in the same way that I did um, 10 or 15 years ago. And I don't necessarily know what it is always that wants to move through me, but sometimes I think that we have more ways of perceiving and picking up information. Like our bodies have more kind of different antenna functions than just what we can see with our eyes or hear with our physical ears. That there are other ways of knowing.
yeah.
I'm curious what your experience is with that.
Yeah. I love that, other ways of knowing. I think that's a very beautiful, simple definition of intuition. It's um, I think of I think of intuition as almost like this wealth or cloud of information that is just like available to us, and it's endless and it's vast. And um, the way that we access it is by kind of bringing ourselves to center and almost like surrender might be too strong of a word, but be less in the mind and just kind of like sink into sink into the beingness of things. And then I feel like those little nuggets of intuition just start to become more available.
Mm.
Um, for me, in my experience, if I'm, for example, sitting down to meditate and I'm asking for guidance on something, if I try to force it,
Mm.
or if I try to like ask a question and then sit there and go, why didn't I hear an answer? Why didn't I
Yeah.
hear an answer? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's it's not accessible. But when I just kind of like center in, um, almost like give my mind a little bit of a rest. It can still be
Mm-hmm.
there a little bit, but give a little bit of rest. Then that can come through, and um, I feel like it's subtle.
Mm.
It's very subtle when it comes through. So the different
Mm.
clairs,
Mm-hmm.
clairaudience, clairsentience, clairvoyance. There's the different ways that that can come into. But for intuition, yeah, it almost feels very very subtle to me, like subtle messages.
Mm-hmm. I love that mention of the different clairs. Like, I different people, like we were saying, different people have different experiences and expression of sensuality. Same thing with intuition. Some people hear things, some people see things, some people just know things, some people feel things in their bodies, and or maybe you have access to more than one of those. Like the information can come in different ways. Um, I think that what I'm hearing you say is sometimes we can. I'm guilty of this too, like we were talking about with the trees. Sometimes we treat things kind of like a vending machine, like, hey, body, if I press this button, will you give me the answer?
Right,
You know,
exactly.
hey, tree, if I come and do this specific ritual with you, you give me the answer.
Hmm.
Um, and there's something about cultivating that intuition that requires us to have a different relationship, for there to be more spaciousness, more slowness, more allowing things to come in their own way, in their own right timing, which is, look, another one of those things that, like, as I say it, I'm like, I have a sense of this, but I also know this can be really hard.
Yeah, yeah. It absolutely can, and it's for me. I find sometimes it's hard to differentiate my thoughts
Mm.
between it and the intuition, because one of my developed clairs is claircognizance, and that's clair knowing.
Hmm.
So like I'm like sometimes I'm like, what's intuition and what did my mind come up with?
Yeah. What are
Yeah.
one or two of the ways you can tell the difference for you?
Um, for me, when it comes through, I hear the word. It's almost like not through my ears. It's almost like I hear the words and they come through super clear. So
Hmm.
when it's a message from intuition, it's like very straightforward. When it's something that I'm not really sure, or it's more mind created, or maybe it is intuition, but it's not fully formed, and I'm grasping too much
Hmm.
for it.
Hmm.
It'll feel a less clear, maybe a little bit muddy,
Hmm.
or like I'm having to try too hard.
Hmm. Hmm. That makes sense. Yeah. Mm. Devotion to our bodies, to nature, and to that which wishes to move through us.
Yeah.
Mm. So, I have one last question for you. But before that, I would love to hear about how people can find you, how people can work with you, and tell us about your podcast.
Oh, yes. Well, you can go to my website, sensualitycoaching.com, and book a free 45-minute private consultation. And that's where we just explore what you're interested in and how I can help, and
Hmm.
if I can help,
Hmm.
and how I can be of service.
Hmm.
And then the podcast is actually, you can go to, it's called Slow the F Down Show. And you can go to slowthefdownshow.com. We're just wrapping up season 2 on that. And that's all about helping people deal with the stress of the pandemic.
Mm. Mm. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm at a stage in my own experience where I really do feel like slowness is sexy to me. And I know it doesn't feel that way for everyone, but there is a real, like, I feel like I can relax in it. There's like space and just more, it just feels better to my system. It's like the antidote to that rushing, do, make it all happen. It has to happen yesterday. And why hasn't it happened yesterday? I must be wrong if I haven't been able to make it happen yesterday.
Yeah.
I just worked myself up even saying that. Myself
well,
a slow breath.
well, and it's, even in my field, I've been coaching for 12 years and I've never helped anybody succeed or heal something by telling them to speed up. It's always required some form of slowing down. And so, yeah, I'm happy that you're at a place where you're like, this is feeling nourishing, because it doesn't at first.
No.
No way. I used to go a million miles per hour. There was no slowing me down. And if someone would have told me to slow down, I'd be like, no, nope. Nope. I don't know what that means. And you're lazy. That's probably what I would have said. That's probably what I would have said. Don't tell me what to do. And you're just lazy. And now I'm like, oh, I'm a podcast. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. So my last question is, if there was one thing that you would just love for people to take away from this conversation, what would it be?
Mm. Let me feel into that. I really appreciated talking about the correlation between our physical bodies, remembering and holding on to stuff, and trees,
Mm-hmm.
remembering and holding on to stuff. Um, and I think just the reminder that when people say that we're one with Mother Nature, that's not something that just sounds nice. It's actually true. Like, we're so deeply interwoven, and so,
Mm-hmm.
the lessons between us and trees and us and Mother Nature are so endless. So it's like, if you're ever needing to understand something better, spend some time in nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think I would love people to take away this, like, to whatever degree it's accessible to you in this moment, the idea of devotion to your body
Mm.
with that approach from the heart with love and care, to listen to your body and meet its needs in such a beautiful way. But it doesn't have to be like 0 to, I worship at the feet of my body today. It can just be like a little bit more sweetness, a little bit more listening.
Beautiful. I love that you brought that word to
Mm.
to this conversation, because it's so important. And
Thank you for sharing your magic with us, Casey.
yeah, thank you for having me.